The meditation talk tonight, get over here so I can see you. Yeah, just like right here. So the meditation for tonight is about being fast and being slow. And this is from our challenges of the week, and it's from the question of the week. So the physical challenge is to be as fast as you can with whatever you're doing for 5 minutes a day. The internal challenge is to go as slowly as you can. Now, that one gets a little bit tricky. Fast as you can is kind of obvious. It's like I'm running literally as fast as I can. Walking as slowly as you can, what does that look like? It's like you're not really walking, you're just kind of like balancing. So more what you could do is just really take your time and focus on the details of whatever you're doing and focus on being in the present, not trying to rushing from A to B. And then the question of the week is something related, but I'll talk about that later on. So when I put these together, maybe when I was creating this week's challenges, I may have been reading this book. I gave a whole talk that was devoted to this book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and it's by Daniel Kahneman. I'm going to give a little bit of a synopsis of the ideas in the book. I think it's a very good, very important book if you're really into how the mind works, and especially with something like our martial arts practice, there's a lot of great information in this. But he describes two different ways that the brain forms thoughts. And so it's like two distinct systems. And this first system is what you think of as being as when you are what's the word when you just think of something and your intuition. There we go. It's the first system is kind of intuition. So it's fast, automatic, frequent, emotional, stereotypic, and unconscious. So examples that this first system could do would be like spatial things, like determining that an object is at a greater distance than another object, localizing the source of a specific sound, completing the phrase war and, displaying disgust when seeing a gruesome image, solving 2 + 2 =, reading text on a billboard. There's always a great Hulu or FX on Hulu billboard right out there, so I always know what to watch next. Driving a car on an empty road, thinking of a good chess move if you're a chess master, and I will tell you that this, I can think of a not the worst chess move. I am not a chess master, so I often first think of an okay chess move, but I have to think for a long time to come up with a really good one. Understanding simple sentences, associating the description. What? This one doesn't make sense to me. Associate the description, quiet and structured person with an eye for details with a specific job. So that's like, I guess you're interviewing somebody and you know that they are quiet and structured with an eye for details, and you know what the perfect job in your organization for them is right away. It's some kind of an intuitive, quick judgment. Then there's a second system, which is more like your methodical, logical mind. So this is slow, effortful, infrequent, logical, calculating, conscious. Examples of that system could do would be preparing yourself for the start of a sprint. So you're not actually in the sprint. It's not the gun has gone off. It's like you're in the prep for the thing that you're about to do. Directing your attention towards the clowns at the circus. Directing your attention towards someone at a loud party. So you see there's the common things here. There's like a lot going on and you're having to kind of zero in on something and parse out all the distractions. Looking for the woman with the gray hair. Try to recognize a sound. Sustain a faster than normal walking rate. So a normal walking rate is easy. That's what your more intuitive, just easy, fast brain can come up with. But a faster than normal is something that you have to think about a little bit more. Determine the appropriateness of a particular behavior in a social setting. Some of us don't have a brain that does that under any circumstances. Count the number of A's in a certain text, the letter A. Give someone your telephone number. Park into a tight parking space. Determine, some of us, no matter what kind of brain we have, just can't get that. Determine the price or quality ratio of 2 washing machines. I've had to do that before. Determine the validity of a complex logical reasoning and solve 17 times 24. So all of these examples, it's kind of easy to see the difference between these two things. And you can tell, like, you'd have to engage your mind in a different way to do the slower, more logical way of being versus the faster, more intuitive way of thinking. And is more of a description here. I'm going to ignore that. And then he goes on to describe the 2 selves, which is related to this, but a distinct concept. And this is actually a really great way of thinking about the way that we are in the present moment, being happy versus the way that we are kind of thinking of ourselves in more long term. So there are 2 ways of thinking of yourself. There's the experiencing self and the remembering self. And so there's another way that the author kind of offers that you could look at this, which is one that assesses pleasure and pain sampled from moment to moment, and then a separate one that sums it up over time. So the first is your experiencing self moment to moment. The second one is how you're experiencing, how you're remembering things over time, and specifically kind of dealing with pain versus suffering. And so the author termed this experienced well-being and attached it to a separate self. So you can remember things in the way that you're like looking back over your life, and it's kind of like you are experiencing that as like a distinct self, a separate self, versus your experiencing self, which is like right now in the moment, what you kind of more are likely to associate with yourself. And I think that this is particularly powerful because we have this idea of being in the present, which on the one hand is a great way to be happy and to be less stressed, because if you're thinking about what's going to happen in the future, or you're thinking about how you messed things up in the past, that's a great source of anxiety for most of us. But if you're just in the present, and for example, you're in class, you're doing the massacre that we did on Monday, and you're thinking about, oh my God, how many more push-ups are we going to do tonight versus this one push-up. And it's this curious thing where when I'm counting reps and it's a really hard class like the massacre, maybe we're doing burpees or sprawls, and I'm counting from 1 to 10, and then I start over and I go from 1 to 10 because my Chinese is not good and I literally only know how to count from 1 to 10 no matter how much my family tries to teach me. The count that people give up on the most is 1. Because up until then, you're thinking, I can do 1 more, I can do 1 more, I can do 1 more. No one gives up on 9 or 10. But when I start counting over at 1 again, then you start thinking, I got to do 10 more of these, no way. And then you give up. And that is just a fun example. It's fun for me. It's not fun for the people in class. But it's an example of this where it's like a very clear distinction between your experiencing self and mind and your remembering, or you're just kind of like stressed about what's about to happen, the anxiety ridden. Now, you can flip that on its head, and you might be in a situation that is particularly stressful, but you can put it into context. And so you can remember, like, yeah, this sucks right now, and this class is really hard, but I love martial arts because of all of the other great memories that I've had and all of the other wonderful experiences. You can be having a particularly garbage day, but you're not necessarily stuck thinking, my life sucks, this is awful, because you can think back and remember all of the great experiences that you've had so far. And this is a very important ability to have, is to both zero in on the present and allow yourself to be totally here and now, and be able to zoom out and just have that kind of memory of how things have gone, and to be able to choose, very importantly, to be able to choose to remember the stuff that motivates and inspires you. So that's a little bit all of a divergence, but I wanted to bring back up that idea. The real challenge of the week is, again, being as fast as you can and being as slow as you can. Those certainly will relate to these different ways of being. If you're moving very fast, you have to be more in your intuitive mind. If you're sparring with somebody, you can't stop and think about, wait, what did Sifu say about how I get out of the way of the punch? Because you already got punched. You're grappling, you got to be able to do whatever you're doing instantly. But then there's also the side of you where, like, we're in class this week and we're starting off throwing techniques very slowly, and you're thinking about how you do this. You're thinking about the last time you did it, how you messed it up, and so how you can fix it this time. And you got to be able to switch between those two mindsets. In class, we switch very quickly between those. The question of the week is related to this, because it's also kind of about being slow when you're thinking versus just being decisive and quick. And the question is, when do you know it's time to stop weighing risks and reward and just do what you know is right? When is it time to stop procrastinating? This is kind of a form of procrastination, because you're putting off making the decision. You keep going over and over in your head, and you're thinking about what's right versus what's wrong, and really on some level you're just making excuses to not do the thing. And I've got a perfect example, because I got my ballot in the mail for the midterm elections, and I got it weeks ago. And I looked at it right away and I thought, ooh, that's a lot of stuff that I want to research. That's a lot of stuff that I want to, really make sure that I'm making the right decisions and voting the way that I really believe. And so I can't possibly do that right now. And every night I would get home from the dojo and I'd look at it and I'd think, oh, I really got to do that. Can't possibly do that right now. It's too much work. It's too much. And so if I had opened it up, I probably would have been able to pretty quickly make up my mind on a lot of things, but then there were the other things that you got to look up, and the people whose views you have to make sure that you're in alignment with, and all that stuff. So it, of course, came down to the last minute. The night before the election is when I finally crack it open, fill it all out, and then take it in. And this is not exactly the same thing as the question of the week, because there's a very clear deadline here. Many things in life do have these clear deadlines. And it might be something as simple as that, where it's like, I know that at a certain point, I have to do this or the decision is taken away from me. And in class, this is like a lightning fast decision-making experience. Like, I have to step this way or I have to step this way, because if I wait to decide, the decision is made for me because I've gotten punched. And usually things are not quite so dramatic and the stakes are not quite so high, but sometimes they are. And so we want to be able to stop kind of waffling back and forth and just make the decision and do what you know is right. Now, implied in this question is there is some sense, and it might be intuition, or it might be something that you have applied some logic to, and you really do know what the right thing to do is, but you're just kind of putting it off. And so I've got a couple of great stories from one of my absolute favorite books, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And these stories get into this idea of being patient, putting things off, and just like making the right decision at some point. The first one actually is just, this is a really nice quick, this is not even really a story, but it's something that I think of from time to time, and it is great. It's a great kind of description of the way that we're trying to be totally present and not let time just pass us by. So this one is called Inch Time Foot Gem. A lord asked Takuan, a Zen teacher, to suggest how he might pass the time. He felt his days very long, attending his office and sitting stiffly to receive the homage of others. I don't know if that's the right way to say that word in this context, but whatever, moving on. Takuan wrote 8 Chinese characters and gave them to the man. Not twice this day. Inch time, foot gem. This day will not come again. Each minute is worth a priceless gem. So that fits into 8 Chinese characters. I really like this. You hear me say more often, like in meditation, we want to imagine that every breath in and every breath out is like we're taking in the entirety of our lifetime. And imagine every time you're taking a sip of tea, it's like you're drinking in the entire universe. The ability to zoom in or zoom out and really bring yourself to the present and really feel the fullness of the moment is key for us. And this is one of the things that we're practicing in meditation. Now, in meditation, you want to just be present without having to kind of think, trick yourself into doing it with these logical, these ideas of, I'm imagining that I'm bringing in my whole lifetime. But to maybe set yourself up for meditation and not allow your mind to just be in this kind of wishy-washy, wandering state, you might think of it like that. Like every breath that comes and goes is like an entire lifetime passing by. I'm either there for it or I'm not, and it's gone. So you can treat it like a precious gem. You can treat it like your whole lifetime. This one I don't think I've ever read to you guys before, but it's a really good one. It's called The Tunnel. Zenkai, the son of a samurai, journeyed to Edo and there became the retainer of a high official. He fell in love with the official's wife and was discovered. In self-defense, he slew the official. Then he ran away with the wife. This is a seriously dramatic story already. Both of them later became thieves. But the woman was so greedy that Zenkai grew disgusted. Finally, leaving her, he journeyed far away to the province of Buzen, where he became a wandering mendicant. To atone for his past, Zenkai resolved to accomplish some good deed in his lifetime. Knowing of a dangerous road over a cliff that had caused the death and injury of many persons, he resolved to cut a tunnel through the mountain there. It's a whole mountain. Begging food in the daytime, Zenkai worked at night digging his tunnel. When 30 years had gone by, the tunnel was 2,280 feet long, 20 feet high, and 30 feet wide. It's a big tunnel. 2 years before the work was completed, the son of the official he had slain, who was a skillful swordsman, found Zenkai out and came to kill him in revenge. I will give you my life willingly, said Zenkai. Only let me finish this work. On the day it is complete, then you may kill me. So the son awaited the day. Several months passed and Zenkai kept on digging. The son grew tired of doing nothing and began to help with the digging. After he had helped for more than a year, he came to admire Zenkai's strong will and character. At last, the tunnel was completed and the people could use it to travel in safety. Now, cut off my head, said Zenkai. My work is done. How can I cut off my own teacher's head? Asked the younger man with tears in his eyes. I really like this story. It is a story of patience and perseverance, which we talk about all the time in the dojo. It's a story of, somebody who had kind of made a split-second decision. It's probably one that if somebody has slain somebody that you're close to, you make a quick decision. I'm going to kill that person. Revenge is not usually something that somebody really spends a lot of time weighing the pros and cons for. They're just like, I'm going to do this. But with time and really getting to know this person, you might start to kind of see things from their perspective and appreciate them a little bit more. And that's what happened in this case. So Zenkai got to live a little bit longer because he dug that tunnel. This last one is kind of a classic story. I've read it a couple times before, but this one is called 3 Days More. And I'm going to butcher this name. Suiwo. The disciple of Hakuin was a good teacher. During one summer seclusion period, a pupil came to him from a southern island of Japan. Suiwo gave him the problem, hear the sound of one hand. For those of you who haven't heard this before, it's a koan that appears later in this book, but it's the question, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And if you have watched The Simpsons, the good years, one of the episodes, Bart he hears this and he's like, I know the sound of one hand clapping. It's like that. That's not the answer to the question. It's meant to be like what is the sound of one hand clapping? There's no actual sound, but it's a riddle. You think about it and it puts you into a Zen state and possibly gives you enlightenment or some measure of it. In any case, he gave him that problem. Hear the sound of one hand. The pupil remained 3 years, but could not pass this test. One night, he came in tears to his teacher. I must return south in shame and embarrassment, he said, for I cannot solve my problem. Wait 1 week more and meditate constantly, advised Suiwo. Still, no enlightenment came to the pupil. Try for another week, he said. The pupil obeyed, but still in vain. Still another week, yet this was of no avail. In despair, the student begged to be released, but Suiwo requested another meditation of 5 days. They were without result. Then he said, meditate for 3 days longer. Then, if you fail to attain enlightenment, you had better kill yourself. On the second day, the pupil was enlightened. So this is a story about a lot of things, but this is kind of like this putting things into perspective, and you're kind of going back and forth and you're like, oh, I'm kind of on the edge here. But when the stakes are high and you run up right against the edge of it, like me voting, except higher stakes, then you have a tendency to be able to kind of pull yourself out of that funk, make your decision, be decisive, act with strength and power and resolve, and do the thing. So that's a lot of the stories in this book are kind of about some form of that. But it's interesting because it is kind of a combination of both ways of being, both types of self, both thinking fast, thinking slow. And we have to have both of these things. You cannot just be intuitive and just do the first thing that comes to mind. You also cannot just be slow and, you know, overly logical and methodical and think through every single thing, because you'll never be able to decide what to eat. You'll never be able to, you know, drive a car because you'll be stuck not knowing which way to turn. You got to be able to be both ways. And so our practice helps us with this. Our meditation helps us with this. And it's interesting because acknowledging these two ways of being and acknowledging your, you know, experiencing self and your remembering self is distinct from fighting against them. We're not trying to get rid of these ways of being. And we're not saying that one is better than the other. In some circumstances, one is better, and in other circumstances, the other is better. You've got to be able to be both. So in meditation, generally speaking, you're more the experiencing self. You're more trying to be totally in the present, which in my mind is more like the intuitive kind of fast version of thinking, but there are ways in meditation or certain kinds of meditations where you might be more the remembering self. But in any case, in our meditation tonight, what you're going to experience is lots of thoughts, and even though you are kind of setting yourself up to be in this present moment, the experiencing self, being here now, looking at the tiniest chunks of time, just one breath at a time, your thinking self, your remembering self, your logical brain is going to try to take over and get you to start doing some kind of work like, we got to think about what we're eating for dinner. We got to think about what we're doing this weekend. We got to think about whatever, solve some problem in your life, all that stuff. And so in our meditation, you are specifically practicing just letting that go, being in the present. And it's no small feat to be totally present. Again, inch time foot gem. Treat it like each moment is the most valuable thing. Your whole lifetime in this breath in and then this breath out. So kind of set yourself with that intention where you're going to take each breath like it is the only thing that matters. And then when your logical brain starts to take over, you start to try to think your way through it, then just practice immediately letting that go and coming back to the present. Sit comfortably.